What if I were to tell you that everything you know about the world that you live in is completely wrong? And this is like the situation that it seems like we're facing as a society. That the overwhelming amount of evidence supporting that our history is skewed to fit certain paradigms or fill quotas, that history just doesn't exist. And how does it feel to know that you were raised in an education system that taught us things that they were totally unsure about as if it were a fact? And you know, there are very few things that we actually learn in school that don't change every year. And mathematics are stable. 1 plus 1 is still 2. And there are little tricks to make 1 plus 1 3 when replacing with the x and doing a bunch of garbage, but in general, math is math. And it's always been the same. And I could say that English changes year by year as the English language changes. The words that we use are consistently changing. And science is consistently changing as we find new discoveries. In fact, science is probably the biggest changing field. The things that we were raised, say, even when I went to school 20 years ago, when I was in high school, it was, they were still teaching us that, let's take dinosaurs, for example. I mean, we found now that people have been putting together dinosaur skeletons of dinosaurs that never existed, back in the 1800s in order to try to get recognition for new discoveries. In fact, they had some in some of the institutes that were in there for a long time with absolutely no real basis other than maybe finding 1 or 2 bones and then trying to build a skeleton off of that. Furthermore, we were raised to believe that Tyrannosaurus Rex was this just giant monster that ran around eating creatures, and anybody could see his arms would realize that, nah, maybe, he's got the teeth for it. Well, we find that he was most likely a scavenger. And not only that, now we're finding that dinosaurs more likely had feathers than scales. The reason why I use dinosaurs is that's just one little corner of science that's completely changed. So everything that we were taught to believe, all these images that we have in our head of the dinosaurs, could be completely wrong. It could have been feathered. What about the sun? That we're taught that the sun is this big ball of hot gas where, it's so dense in the center that it's plasma, and that, the molecules can't even form because of the intense pressure, and we create these images of what's happening inside this giant ball of heat that's millions of times larger than our planet, or 1,000,000 times larger, and using our assumptions based on what we learn in a laboratory. And we're still trying to create mini suns. They've been able to do it for a split second, but there's something that never quite is right. So rather than us as a society admit, okay, we don't know certain things, we always have to make a theory and then make it appear to be true. And this is why now, with the flow of information, we're all feeling let down. And, it's okay to admit that we were wrong. And it's okay to change as we learn. But what's not okay is to back science up 100% just because of the fact that that they used the scientific method, or that this is the only way to do things, because it only includes what we know for fact and what we can prove repeatedly in a lab. And so we're kind of left to our own devices, and for our parents and the older generations, it was fine, because they heard what they needed from school, and then they got what they needed from life from their jobs. But now we're inundated with all this overwhelming information, and you can opt out of it if you want, but if you spend any time at all on the internet, you'll start asking yourself questions, being like, hey, is this true? Are these true? I mean, 25 years ago, I knew nobody who knew anything about the Illuminati or the Freemasons or the World Banking cartels or the Rothschilds. And nowadays, it's just it's become, you know, almost just common knowledge with anyone who seeks anything. You know, you no longer have to read a long book or find a person who's already been into it. You can just, at the click of a button, have what you need. So this leads me to, I've seen the slide from everyone being lied to, and then this massive migration of people to alternate media. And then we depend on the alternate media for our sources of information. Then there are groups of people who are capitalizing on this, of course. You know, any information that people want to be provided will be provided, whether it's true or not. If it's something people want to hear, then people will print it. And that's why there have been books written about such garbage for, you know, as long as books have been written, as long as it's been cheap enough to print. And I guess that was one of the advantages to the ancient times. You know, when you put something down on paper, you know, it was usually important, because you didn't sit there and fuck around with making your papyrus and paper and you know, your pen and your ink, and things were valuable. Once printing press became available, it was a lot easier to print, but still it cost money and time, so usually it was a valid book. Nowadays you can print anything you want, and on the computer it's even worse, because all you have to do is type a paragraph. You know, I can make this video, I can make a video claiming that something is true and have absolutely no backup for it, but be very convincing and get a huge following, and all of a sudden people start believing it. This is how, you know, rumors and urban legends get started. And so what I've seen is a migration to alternate media in such an extreme form that the people who say, hey, we need to question mainstream media because they're bullshitting us, they're failing to question alternative media. It's like, it's almost like some of the folks who are telling these stories are infallible. You know, that everything they're saying is true because they're speaking out against the status quo or the government. You know, well, if this person's speaking out against tyranny, then he must be on my side, and that's just not the way it is. You know, if a person is speaking out against a tyrannical government, and you're speaking out against a tyrannical government, you still may have completely different values. You know, one person may be believe that violence is the answer, and you may believe that it's passivity, and you go back and forth on it, and you start to realize that we're really at the mercy of our own searching, we have to seek our own truths. We can't rely on others to find the news for us. And you'll hear this over and over from people, the good people who speak will say, don't listen to me, find this out for yourself, you know. A good researcher will say, here's what I've found, go confirm it. And this is what I look at subjects from both sides. You know, when I find something that people are really fanatical about, I have to look at it from both sides and look at the evidence. And I can't assume that all the science is flawed, and I can't assume that anyone who is involved in government is lying to me, or anyone who is, you know, has money is just trying to pull the wool over my eyes. Although this is often the case, it's not always the case. Everyone deserves to know, and there's certain knowledge that should be innate, universal knowledge that we're all entitled to. And so we want to know the inner workings of some groups or organizations, whereas that's often not knowledge that we should be privy to, unless that organization represents us, as in a government entity. No, we're never going to know the inner workings of a corporation. You know, these are secrets, trade secrets, and people deserve to have certain secrets. But if there are folks out there that are holding secrets about what humanity is, why we're here, and what we're supposed to do, that's knowledge that we should all be entitled to. So the only way we're going to discover that is if we stop arguing about you know, political and religious affiliations, and stop the division and the hate, because I'm going to tell you, you know, there are a lot of people out there who believe that since they've been lied to for so long by media, that all of a sudden they're going to be provided the real information just because it's on the internet and because it's not mainstream. And that's just not true. The folks who want to pull the wool over your eyes, the people who really want you to you know, believe lies and to keep the light off of the true problem, which is the bankers, banking cartels, you know, financial institutions, as well as certain, organizations, religious organizations, or ones that claim to be religious organizations, or even small countries. It's not really, if they want to lie to us, then they have trillions upon trillions of dollars to do the research to find out what the best way to do that is. And they have. And the way they've found to do it is by putting out half-truths, by sponsoring lies laced with a little bit of truth. So when people look into it, they find, oh, hey, the person that this guy quoted really did exist. Oh, hey, this really is true. And that's how they can take ideas and turn it into a true story. People like Alex Jones can go out there and convince, millions of people that he's for real, that everything he says is true. And what it is it's not what a person says that determines whether or not they're telling the truth. It's what they're not saying. It's what a person omits. So a lot of these alternate news medias will talk about everything except for what's really important. You'll notice they'll try to get you riled up, they'll try to get you angry, they try to get you worried about losing your guns, they try to worry about anarchy, the end of the world, martial law. Meanwhile, people are all riled up over it, and the people with the power are still in power, making no dent in that. It's not changing that. So you dig deeper and deeper, and you start to think that what do we do to change it? Can we complain about the banks? No. Can we complain about anything? No, not as long as we're part of the system. And this is why we have to opt out in any way possible. Opt out from any government programs. Opt out from assistance. Opt out from more taxation. Opt out from products that sponsor taxation. Use as little fuel as you can. And what I think this does to some folks is gets them angry because they see everyone around them abusing everything, all the resources. Meanwhile, they're trying their hardest to be a good person and live right, and often people just give up and say screw it. And they have the old if you can't beat them, join them attitude. And that's not integrity. That's where you lose your values when you start doing that. So I can see why people get angry because they're being lied to, and I can also see how they flock to certain places to get their information. But I've got to say honestly, if you want to get real information, you're never going to get it from one source. You're never going to get it from 2 or 3 sources. And WASP. You're going to get it from the people around you. You're going to get it from the average Joe who's perhaps affiliated with one of these groups, or a person who says, hey, I've discovered a way to create free energy, or I've discovered a way to to not have to pay into this, or not have to be part of that, and basically abandon the system without abandoning your principles or your fellow man. And that's where the most important part of it lies, is to not opt out of society. And as if a Buddhist monk, would go into a cave and over a period of time may realize that that wasn't the way. The story of Buddha is a great example. He was an ascetic for a while. He didn't eat anything but like a grain of rice a day for like 7 years or something, and finally one day had to admit that he was wrong, and that what he thought was the path to enlightenment wasn't. And so he ate a fat meal and he went off and meditated under a tree later. So, my point on that is that we're all fallible, we all make mistakes, but sometimes we have to admit when our path is not taking us the right direction. And only through experience can we learn how to properly behave so it works for everyone. Only through experience. And making mistakes is part of that experience. It's essential. And we can't let ourselves down when we're wrong about something, or just because we've been fooled. Because ultimately, and I hate saying this because a lot of folks, would like to think that the blame can be cast on a government or a corporation or another country, but ultimately it all comes down to us. And that's the view people have of America as a consumer nation. I mean, the nation that consumes the most and has a very small part of the world population in comparison. And I love my country. and I love the freedom that it stands for, but I don't love the infiltration that has happened since the very beginning. These aren't new things. This is something that's been going on for a long time. So the symbol of our country and what a country actually is are two completely different things. So what the people and the powers that be, what they want to do is basically get anybody who is either a strong patriot out of the picture, or anyone who is a non-patriot or opposed to the government. They want to make all the patriots bash those people and say, oh, you're un-American, you know, move out of the country if you don't like it. And that defeatist attitude of, you know, it is what it is, just doesn't work. It doesn't hold water. So they fear us. They fear us. They fear the power that we finally have to organize. And the way that they're keeping us from learning is by putting out truly fake news. And yes, they really do have people that are hired to go from website to website, disputing things, casting doubts, even going to video. I know a lot of people who make videos, maybe have a couple hundred subscribers. They think that the NSA is, you know, trolling their website and stuff. Hey, maybe possible, but I really doubt. I think it's going to have more to do with a larger following that's going to attract that type of attention. But eventually you're going to get the attention of the powers, because if you're exposing things, they're going to want to make you look as crazy as possible. So we can't learn from any one source, because any source can be corrupted, and the larger the source is, the more corrupted it is because of finances. So the best that we can do is learn from one another. These little organized groups that we're forming. And the trick, I guess, is not to organize a group. Not organize it, per se. Just to have a bunch of people that can talk loosely. There should never be a leader. There should never be a name for it. Even anonymous was too much. You know what I mean? We are the anonymous, you know. The passive group of people who want to see things change and know that we can. So let's try. Let's do what we can. Peace and love to everybody.